Right, I'm with another UFO witness who's called Finn Handley, and he's from Monmouth in South Wales. Now then, Finn, you've had 2 or 3 sightings. Each time it's involved black triangles in some way or another.
Yeah.
Just give us the most prominent one first, and then you can give us the ones that happened earlier. You're a taxi driver,
Yeah.
so...
Or between 10 o'clock and 10:30, and I was coming down the dual carriageway from a place called Goodrich, which is about a mile outside of Monmouth, or 2 miles. And as I came up to the traffic lights on the dual carriageway, kind of parallel to the centre of town in Monmouth, I noticed these 2 balls of light, what looked like 2 balls of light, hovering above the trees just to the right of the motorway. Maybe 40 metres away from me, because they were to the right of the motorway and just above some trees that are in Chippenham Park, which is right next to the motorway. So they were set back a little from the motorway and above these trees in the park. So I was looking at them while the traffic lights were red, and the traffic lights turned green. So I headed down the motorway, and I started to wind down my window so I could get a bit better look at these things. So as I drove past them with the window wound down, I was literally looking straight across the dual carriageway at these balls of light hovering above the trees. They were a matter of metres above the trees, maybe 5 metres. And they were 2 balls of light. One of them was below the other and slightly smaller than the other. So they were both roughly basketball size. I think the larger one was slightly larger than a basketball, and then the smaller one below it was maybe the size of a football or a little smaller than that, so about 2/3 the size of the one above it. And the smaller one had a large spike sticking out the right hand side of it. I mean, seeing these 2 balls of light is bizarre enough, but seeing the spike coming out of one side of it, and it was kind of protruding out of one side, a sharp spike. Both balls of light appeared to be kind of fizzing as if they were unstable, and I actually wanted to get a bit of distance from them. So I carried on driving while I was looking at this spike coming out one side. It looked like it was actually growing out, like it was extending in length a little bit. But I didn't kind of stop there to find out what was going on, because I didn't feel all that safe. So I carried on driving up to the slip road, pulled into the slip road, got out of the car, turned back to look at these balls of light, and now there were no longer 2 balls of light in there where they were. They were 2 large black triangles, and they were right next to each other, except that one was set back slightly from the other as if they were in a staggered formation. And they were literally in exactly the same place where I'd seen the balls of light 10 seconds earlier. It must have taken me about 10 seconds to drive the car to the slip road and pull over and get out, maybe 15 seconds.
Can you give an estimate of size of these triangles?
Yeah, in the way I explained them on the night when I got home and wrote it all down, was that they were the size of each triangle was roughly the size of the roof of the petrol garage at the bottom end of Monmouth. Right. And that petrol garage has got 12 pumps. So you can imagine 12 cars parked underneath roughly each triangle. You know, if you'd squeeze all the cars together, you could fit about 12. And they were kind of dark grey, not really black. You know, you look at the stealth aircraft and that sort of thing. You look at the B-2 stealth bomber, even in daylight, in some of those air shows that you can look at on YouTube. It's like pitch black. These things were more slightly grey, so a very dark grey, but not totally black.
Can you remember any lighting on them at all?
So if you imagine that this was actually a triangular shape, and this is the back end, and the triangle point would be at the front end. If this is the back end of the triangles, there were 4, and they were obviously flat like this as they went along. There were 4 blue oblong-shaped lights along the back end in a row, and they were quite fat and quite prominent. And I could see they actually bulged out. Just there was a bulge to them. They weren't kind of inset. They were bulging out, and they were turquoise blue and quite large compared to all the other lights, which were spread over the rest of the underside of the triangle. And there were about 10 other lights of different colours, but in a pattern. So if there was a green light on one side, there'd be another one opposite it on the other side. So it was symmetrical layout of lights, but lots of different colours. So I'm thinking they were kind of yellow, definitely white. There was a white light on each point, but there were also on the other side yellow, red, green, and these blue ones is what I'm thinking. But the layout of the lights underneath was quite complex, so I don't remember the exact layout, even though I drew it a rough estimation of what it was in my Photoshop recreation that I did on my computer the night it happened. But the one that I remember, the lights that I remember, were 4 oblong-shaped lights along the back end, which were very distinctive. And then as both of the triangles crossed over the motorway and they turned their back ends towards me, all of the lights changed to a white colour. All of the lights, as if someone just turned a dimmer switch and changed all the colours to white. Every single light on it faded to white on both triangles at exactly the same time. This was like these things were on rails, and they just went absolutely smoothly and perfectly exactly where they wanted to go, and there was no kind of a clue that they were, it wasn't like they were using air to keep them up. They were went exactly, just like magnets, they went exactly where they wanted to go, and there was no kind of buffeting or moving up and down. And while they were hovering, it was like they were sat there on a rod, because they just did not move at all. But after about 5 to 10 seconds, they started to move across the motorway at about walking pace. It was quite slow how fast they moved. And I think it may have taken another 10 seconds for them to cross the motorway. As they went across the motorway, they actually extended in length. So they started off as equilateral triangles, pretty much identical to the other 2 times when I'd seen them, which we'll get into later. But as they crossed the motorway, the front was actually getting longer as it was moving slightly faster than the back end. In other words, they were elongating as they were moving. So by the time they got to about halfway across, they were now longer triangles, more like an arrowhead sort of shape than a equilateral triangle shape. They also went transparent, like the heat haze on a hot road. If you're looking at a hot road and you see this kind of rippling effect, it was like that sort of rippling effect, or looking at water when it's rippling. I could tell that they were still there, but they were transparent, and this lasted about half a second. It literally was like someone just pressed a button and then pressed it again at that sort of speed, as if, right, turn on the invisibility, now turn it off again. So it was very quick, but it was quite distinct and quite obvious. And again, both of them did it at exactly the same time. So both triangles went ripply and then went solid again, and this was all as they were moving across the road. And now one of them heads up the motorway towards Ross-on-Wye. It seemed to accelerate, but it didn't shoot off at really high speed. They were going at walking pace, and then it just started to pick up speed as it went off into the distance. And the other one had turned its back to me, and it went away a little while, and then for 10-20 meters, and then turned right and followed the Wye Bridge straight over the river and headed over towards Wysham. And interestingly, I've got some newspaper clippings. Other people saw the black triangles on that night, and one of them was a guy who lives in Wysham. I spoke to him on the phone about it afterwards. But the first sighting of these triangles happened in late 2007, and I've got the exact date. I'm thinking it was around 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. It was in the winter, so it was already dark. And as I was driving down the road, good visibility on the ground, but there was a thick layer of fog above, and I saw these 2 balls of light dropping out of this cloud layer, and they headed down behind the housing estate near my sister's house. So I pulled the car up. I thought I might as well just park up at my sister's place. So I pulled around into her car park, got out of the car, looked back in the direction where I'd seen these balls of light dropping behind the estate, and lo and behold, out from behind the rooftops came these 2 black triangles. They were equilateral in size. They appeared to be quite small, maybe the size of a single-man jet fighter. At the largest, about that size. They seemed to be relatively high, maybe the height of Big Ben, and they both flew over my sister's house. They had white lights on each point, and no other visible lights apart from a light right in the centre, which was flashing, and this light was also white. So the flashing light on it, plus the fact that this all seemed a bit too good to be true, I put it down to being some sort of aircraft that I'd not seen before, but I knew deep down that these could be black triangles, because I'd heard of black triangles before. Okay. And they were clearly triangular shaped. I didn't hear any noise, So yeah, and they just headed off towards the centre, in the direction of the centre of Monmouth, and that was that.
I have had similar accounts, in particular a guy called Eric Goring in Lincolnshire described almost exactly what you've just described. It didn't have the spike coming out of the orb though, but it had the materializing effect and the balls of light which seemed to turn into a triangle, which sounds completely bizarre.
Yeah.
But maybe it's a stealth craft, maybe it's ET, who knows. But thanks very much.
Indeed. Thanks very much, Rich.